Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would give my little fight review and overall basically give the news about the Gervonta Davis versus Rolly Romero fight. And this was somewhat of an interesting fight. I did predict that Gervonta Davis would get the knockout, probably somewhere within about 7 to 8 rounds. I think that this knockout happened within the sixth round, so I pretty much was right on the money with what I thought was going to happen in this fight. I said that I thought that Gervonta Davis, in my view, overall was going to carry him a little bit. But to be quite honest with you, Gervonta Davis, from what I've seen from him in this fight, I did not think, in my view, that he really put on the best of performances. I thought that he got hit a little bit more than what overall I would have liked him to. I think all in all that maybe he could have found his shots a little bit better. Now I'm not necessarily sure if he was underestimating Rolly Romero or maybe all in all it was just an off night. But I do have to somewhat wonder about Gervonta Davis if his future is as bright as maybe as I once thought that it was. And I know a certain amount of people they may come on this channel and they may, take a look at me and they'll say, "Oh, well, you sound like a hater, you sound like this." I'm a person overall that basically overall tries to be as logical and objective as possible. And just like I said about Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez after he lost to Dimitri Bivol, when I did not think that he put on the best performance, or Deontay Wilder after he lost to Tyson Fury, or Brian Castano after he lost to Jamel Charlo, I also have to be honest about Mr. Gervonta Davis, who I believe, in my view, when I see him at his best, looks like one of the top 10 most talented fighters in boxing. Certainly, some would maybe even debate one of the best five. But this is now the second somewhat underwhelming performance in a row by Gervonta Davis. Pretty much overall by another. I don't want to, well, Rolly Romero, I definitely would call a subpar fighter in my view because there's just really not a lot that Rolly Romero has besides power. He has very poor footwork. He has very poor defense. He doesn't keep his chin tucked when it comes down to it. The only thing that Rolly Romero is really known for is really just pure raw athleticism. I don't think that Rolly Romero is really ever going to be an A grade fighter. To be quite honest with you, I don't even ever think that he's going to be a B grade fighter. Now, I could be wrong about that, but in my view, it is finally the time for Gervonta Davis to step up and fight some A grade competition. Now, once again, I thought the Leo Santa Cruz win, even though Leo Santa Cruz probably in terms of weight was smaller, I still give Gervonta Davis credit for that victory because at the time Leo Santa Cruz still was looked at as one of the top fighters in the world. But now we know that you can defeat the likes of Leo Santa Cruz. You really haven't fought any other A grade fighters in your career other than that of Leo Santa Cruz. And I think that it's about time that Gervonta Davis finally starts to step into the ring with that of the elite class fighters. What fighters am I talking about? Vasily Lomachenko, maybe a Teofimo Lopez. If we're talking about 140, Josh Taylor, Regis Prograis, Jose Ramirez. If we're talking about 135, the winner of the George Kambosos versus Devin Haney bout, or maybe even the loser, because both of those fighters, you can at least debate are on the A minus level when it comes down to it. And then maybe, of course, a Teofimo Lopez, maybe a Ryan Garcia. That's not me saying that every single one of these opponents have stepped to the forefront overall necessarily, but there have been certain opponents all in all, like that of a Vasily Lomachenko in the past, and maybe even some others that have offered to possibly fight Gervonta Davis, and Gervonta Davis just has not seemed interested. So hopefully we finally get to see Gervonta Davis in an actual, real competitive match in his next fight. And when I say a competitive match, I'm talking about a fighter that actually has a chance with his talent level. Because Gervonta Davis, in my view, he is an extraordinary talent. An extraordinary talent when he is at his best. And to be quite honest with you, Gervonta Davis did not really look at his best in my view in this fight. I think all in all that he looked a little bit perplexed, that he looked a little bit lost in this fight. And to be quite honest with you, it looked like Gervonta Davis was almost suffering from a panic attack. And I think all in all, we have to be, logical and objective to where we can tell when a fighter looks, at least in my view, a little bit different compared in certain fights to what they used to. When Canelo Alvarez was in the Dimitri Bivol fight, I thought that Canelo looked different compared to some of his other fights because I thought that his stamina level was so poor. Now if you're talking about Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury, for example, I did not think that Deontay Wilder looked any different in any of the Tyson Fury fights because Deontay Wilder pretty much has been fighting like that his whole entire career. But when I take a look at Gervonta Davis, within these past two fights, he does not look like he has the same pizzazz. He does not look like overall he has the same ability of what he once did. And in my opinion, I really don't even consider his past two opponents really even a bigger threat to Gervonta than that of a Mario Barrios. Because in my opinion, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, he's a decent fighter, but he's not an A grade fighter. It just is what it is. Rolly Romero certainly is not an A grade fighter. He's pretty much a person all in all that he talks a lot of trash, but he pretty much is gonna write, himself some checks that overall his ass can't cash. He has no skills whatsoever compared to that of a Gervonta Tank Davis. No defense, no footwork when it comes down to it. I give Rolly credit for the fight that he was able to put up in the fight, but I think that if he actually was going to win the fight, that I think that he just would have had to been more skilled and more talented in the first place. I think he would have had to develop a better jab, maybe use the left hook, go down to the body, which he never did in this fight. And it was only a matter of time before Rolly Romero, in my view, was going to eventually get knocked out because he's just nowhere near on the Gervonta Tank Davis level. And to be quite honest with you, this looked like a Gervonta Tank Davis, at least when I've seen him at his best. This looked like a Gervonta Tank Davis that really was not even at 100%. Now, I'm not saying that he had any injuries or anything like that, but for whatever reason, Gervonta Tank Davis looked somewhat mentally upset in this fight. I'm not sure if that's because Rolly Romero got in his head. Maybe Gervonta Tank Davis was carrying him a little bit more than what it seemed. But I've seen fighters somewhat carry a fighter throughout a fight. When I seen Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Conor McGregor, I seen Floyd Mayweather Jr. carry Conor McGregor. All right, this did not look like a fighter, in my view, that was carrying a fighter. It looked like a fighter that actually was having a certain amount of problems up until the knockout ended up happening within that sixth round. And something overall just seemed a little bit mentally off with that of Gervonta Tank Davis to me in this fight. So whatever it is, maybe it's the Floyd Mayweather Jr. situation. I don't necessarily know. I do hope the best for Gervonta Tank Davis later on down the line because I do think that he is an extraordinary talent. Excuse me. So we'll see all in all what happens with Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis. In terms of Rolly Romero, if you're asking me, what do I personally believe for his future? I really don't think that Rolly Romero really has that big of a future in boxing. It just is what it is. I think that Rolly Romero, maybe he should take a couple of other big fights and he should pretty much call it a day. And I know a lot of people that are not necessarily going to agree with that. I do not think that if Rolly Romero fights any of the other top contenders at their best, I don't think that he actually has a legitimate shot of beating them. If we're talking about Vasily Lomachenko, if we're talking about, Gervonta Tank Davis, even Isaac Pitbull Cruz, if we're talking about Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, George Kambosos, Devin Haney, do any of us really, really, truly believe that Rolly Romero overall is going to be favored against any of those guys? That's not me stating that maybe he can get one or two wins against those guys, but he's not going to defeat the creme de la creme because he is not the creme de la creme. He's a very gifted athletic fighter, but he really doesn't have much else on his side. He has pretty much almost a very subpar skill set. Like I said, I mentioned all his faults earlier, and it was only a matter of time before Gervonta Tank Davis more than likely was going to catch him because Gervonta Tank Davis does have that one-shot knockout power. But what fights would I like to see Gervonta Tank Davis in next? I would like to see him maybe against the winner of the George Kambosos versus Devin Haney fight, or maybe he could go up face out of a Josh Taylor or someone else at 140. There's a lot of fights on the table, in my opinion, for Gervonta Tank Davis. The question will be, is his willingness to take it? And I have a lot of respect for Gervonta Tank Davis. I think that he is an extraordinary talent. But I cannot say that, in my view, that this was a great matchup because great matchups, in my view, are fights all in all that I believe where the other fighter is at least somewhat on a decent caliber. And Rolly Romero, he really had no chance in this fight whatsoever. The only chance that he really had in this fight was pretty much landing a good amount of shots on Gervonta Tank Davis or maybe catching him on an off night. And to be quite honest with you, I think that Gervonta Tank Davis was a little bit off tonight, and he still did not get the job done. Rolly Romero, in my opinion, he's just he is not an elite fighter. To be honest with you, it's really even debatable if he's an average skilled fighter. It is what it is. But anyways, when it comes down to all in all, congratulations to Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis. I do hope all in all that something mentally is not going on with him because it does seem like something mentally has been going on with him within his past two fights. And I'm not necessarily sure what it is. Maybe it's the Mayweather situation, or maybe it's a certain amount of pressure that he has, or maybe something else is going on. I have heard certain, recent, or I won't say recent things, but I have heard certain things in the news about Gervonta Tank Davis in the past Could it be maybe that Gervonta Davis is having a mental breakdown somewhat, and that some of the pressure of being a professional athlete is getting to him? It could be. Who the hell knows? But we'll see. I don't know what ends up happening. But anyways, congratulations to Mr. Gervonta Davis. I would like to see him in a fight with either Vasily Lomachenko or Kambosos or Devin Haney or Shakur Stevenson or some fighter along those lines. Maybe even if he's going up back to 140, a Josh Taylor, a Regis Prograis, a Jose Ramirez. But we'll see what happens. But Gervonta Davis at the current moment in time, even though I do believe that he is a top 10 pound per pound talent, in terms of results and in terms of his resume, I can no longer have him on my top 10 pound per pound list. At the beginning of the year, I believe that I had him at the ninth spot, and he can no longer be on my list. And the reason why that is because when we talk about the top 5 pound per pound, I have people like Terrence Bud Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., Alexander Usyk, and also that of Tyson Fury. And of course, I have Canelo Alvarez now number 5 because I still do believe that he is the complete unified super middleweight champion of the world. And I think that his skill set, when he's at his best, and I think all in all what he's accomplished with the resume that he has, speaks for itself. And then on top of that, now you have to enter Dimitri Bivol in the top 10 pound per pound list. You probably have to have Shakur Stevenson on your top 10 pound per pound list now. You still probably have Josh Taylor on your pound per pound list because he has all the belts and he defeated some decent fighters at 140. More than likely, it's a possibility that Jermell Charlo could be there. If you want to put him there in the winner of the George Kambosos versus Devin Haney fight, they could possibly be there as well. And that's not even possibly bringing up other fighters like Juan Francisco Estrada, Naoya Inoue, and maybe a few others. So at the end of the day, Gervonta Davis, even though I have a very high regard for him in terms of how talented he is, I do think all in all that in terms of a resume, that he does have to work on a resume. And hopefully, at least for Gervonta Davis's sake, he puts on a better performance than what he did within his past 2 fights. Because to be quite honest with you, compared to his usual standards, these past 2 performances, even though he ended up getting the victory, in my view, they actually were subpar to his usual standards. But it just is what it is. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.